system was not abrupt, and we just not evolved it in our Constituent Assembly and introduced. There was a gradual process, and we started almost during the 190 years, and especially after 1858, the proclamation of the Queen, and when the power was actually transferred from the East India Company to the British sovereign. Prior to that, the three governments were brought under one in 1773 Regulating Act, and thereafter in 1774, the institution of Governor General under the Governor Generalship of Warren Hastings was established, and the government at Fort William in Calcutta was made the central government of whole of India, having control over the government at Fort St. George and government at Bombay Presidency. In 1852, for the first time, one Indian organization, British Indian Association of Calcutta, they made a petition to the British Parliament that when you are going to have the next Charter Act, provide a legislature to India. 1853, the Charter Act was introduced by the British Parliament, British government, but there was no legislature as such. But it was a clear indication that the council itself of the Governor Generals, they will function in both executive wing and legislative wing. 1862, the Council Act was passed, and after that, the Governor General Lord Canning, for the first time, appointed 3 Indians in the legislative wing of the Council: King of Benares, King of Patiala, and King of Gwalior, Maharaja. And these 3 persons were appointed for the first time. And 1862 to 1892, large number of Indians were included, and many of them made very valuable contribution in evolution of the parliamentary system in India. And thereafter I will skip over many of the provisions there, but straight I would like to come to monumental reforms in the first part of the last century, and thereafter Montagu-Chelmsford reforms. Indian political system was also galvanizing itself, and good deal of public interests were taken, and some sort of parliamentary character was assigned also to the Indian National Congress, and many of the older writers described it as the first national parliament of India. In the monumental reforms, many of the Indians were introduced, especially in the presidency towns and some of the provinces, British Indian provinces. Councils were established, Indian members were introduced, eminent Indian members, and they made great contributions. Major breakthrough came through the 1998 Montagu-Chelmsford reforms, 1919. And that also there was a political debate. By that time, Mahatma Gandhi had assumed the leadership of Indian National Congress, and he was not in favor of accepting the 1919 Act and joining. He did not want that Congress should join the councils. And that led to the evolution of the Swarajya Party under the leadership of Pandit Motilal Nehru, Deshbandhu Chittaranjan Das, Satyamurthy, and many other stalwarts. But finally, after the Government of India Act 1935, when the provincial autonomy was given, though the elections took place on a basis of the very limited franchise, in 1937 and in 1946, before we adopted our constitution and before the passage of the Government of India Independence Act 1947 by the British Parliament, these were the major landscape towards the evolution of the parliamentary system. And how it was utilized by the Indian parliamentarians are quite interesting stories in the evolution of the parliamentary system. One eminent member of the Central Assemblies in those days, Satyamurthy, was described as the terror in the question hours because he was so thorough and fearful in putting searching questions that even the British members of the Executive Council were really scared and mortally afraid. And one day they complained that he is a real terror in the Central Assembly and during the question hour especially. Motilal Nehru, Tej Bahadur Sapru, Bhulabhai Desai, Satyamurthy, Firoz Shah Mehta, outstanding parliamentarians in those days with a very limited authority and capacity, they made great contributions in the process of the evolution of parliamentary system. Therefore, it was easier for us, and even in the Constituent Assembly, if you go through the debates of the Constituent Assembly, you will find that it was not an exercise in isolation. It was an exercise in some sort of, in the process of continuation. Though major changes were brought in the parliamentary system over the years, and I would like to take this opportunity of discussing some of these issues. I choose on this occasion that my topic, as you have seen, that Jawaharlal Nehru and parliamentary democracy, as I quoted profusely from his observations in parliament, but on certain aspects on which I would like to discuss with it. And even two of the institutions, important institutions, which can be considered as very important milestone in parliamentary practice, that is Committee of Public Accounts. As early as 1921, Public Accounts Committee was created in India Legislative Assembly. Speaker was British, most of the members were Britishers, but nonetheless, to have parliamentary authority over executive in respect of money and finance, the establishment of the Public Accounts Committee was agreed to by the then Speaker, and he persuaded the Governor General to accept it. I am told the motion was moved by Motilal Nehru as a private member's motion. And another problem normally the speakers and presiding officers faced, that most of the times their secretariat was manned by the executive, and sometimes they found it difficult to administer the independence of the legislature, which was the objective, and British speakers also very aggressive to protect the independence of the legislature. And again in 1924, Motilal Nehru moved a motion that let there be a separate secretariat which will be totally divorced from normal executive. Under the authority of the presiding officer, this secretariat will function, and this is the practice till today, including the pay and salary and every part. It is not determined by the normal pay commission, and recruitment and all other things take place under the control of the Speaker and control of the Speaker of Chairman of Rajya Sabha, and also in the state legislatures. But in this connection, I would also like to point out that when we began, we found that our committee system was a little weak. In the sense, except PAC, there was not many parliamentary committee. In the 50s, an institution was created with the title of the Informal Consultative Committee, in which ministers used to preside over the committee of the members, and they used to make, in each ministry it was attached, every ministry had one, and the departmental minister used to preside over, and they used to raise the questions of the administration. Thereafter, the estimates committee was established in the early 60s. But there was a major breakthrough in the 90s when Parliamentary Standing Committee came to exist. Though as per the charter and mandate of the Parliamentary Standing Committee, they can scrutinize the demands for grants in respect of the ministries. They can analyze and debate the annual report of the ministry concerned, and all legislations relating to the ministry will have to be sent to the Departmental Standing Committee for its scrutiny before its consideration in the House. Stage is, it will be introduced in the House, thereafter it will be sent to the committee, thereafter it will, on the report of the committee, the legislations will take place. These three have been established and they are doing good job. Originally it was 16 and now it is 24. But nonetheless, Indian parliamentary system is also facing certain challenges which are very important. And one such challenge was initially, in fact, 15 Lok Sabhas have been completed, 16 Lok Sabha elections are going to take place in 2014. Before 1977, there was no recognized opposition in Indian Parliament. 1977, for the first time, when Congress was defeated, Congress party was considered as the opposition party, recognized opposition party, because as per rules of the Parliament, to constitute a party, one must have at least 10% of the total members of the House. In Indian Parliament, 52, 57, 62, 67, 71, in all these elections, not a single party got 50 seats. That does not mean there was no opposition. Large number of political parties were there. Even in 1977, even in 1952, the first general election, the total number of voters were 173 million. 77 political parties participated in the first general elections. 3,772 candidates were there in 489 parliamentary constituencies. And the comment of Manchester Guardian was, on 2nd February, when the election process was on, that year election began in October and ended in March. And nowadays it is very shortened, but at that time it was very long. They commented, I quote, "If ever a country took a leap in the dark towards democracy, it was India." Unquote. But after the election, it was so impressive that the Chief Election Commissioner at that point of time, Dr. Sukumar Sen, was invited by the United Nations to conduct the elections in Sudan, plebiscite in Sudan. Therefore, the principal opposition was not there. And Nehru is making a comment on opposition, which is very interesting. I do not want India to be a country in which millions of people say yes to one man. I want a strong opposition. Therefore, he treated all opposition members with great respect. As I was mentioning, that 77 recognized opposition party came. Again in 1980-84, no political parties got 10% of seats in the Lok Sabha. 89 onwards, in all elections there had been the regular recognized opposition parties, and nowadays we have it. Professor N.G. Ranga once commented, Professor N.G. Ranga is one of the parliamentarians who continue 50 years as members of Indian Parliament. Not, of course, taking into account the Central Legislative Assembly, Constituent Assembly, Provisional Parliament, and thereafter Lok Sabha. So he commented that Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru always used to treat Parliament as a comrade and a necessary aid to the ministers. Therefore, the private members, oppositions, they have a very major role in the parliamentary politics. I'm afraid I'm running my time, but still certain important points are there. So, opposition, nowadays we are finding oppositions. So there is that problem is no longer there. There is recognized opposition parties. But what are the challenges before the parliamentary system today? As an activist and being a member of the Indian Parliament for beginning from 1969 till I resigned, I had not to resign because my membership was automatically terminated on 25th July when I was declared elected president. Till then I had the privilege of serving two houses. 5 terms in Rajya Sabha and 2 terms in Lok Sabha. And I also had the privilege of serving as the leader of the house in both the houses. The point which I noticed, one important aspect is, and perhaps our parliamentarians and policy makers could think of, the transaction of the government business has become complex, but we are not giving time which is to be given for parliament. In the days, if you look at our first budget, it was total 197 crores, just a paltry. Today perhaps the finance minister gives exemption every day about 200 crores. And 197 crores was the total budget of first independent India presented by Shanmugam Chetty on 14th November 1947, because first budget was presented in the month of March, regular budget, by Liaquat Ali as finance member in the Central Assembly. And total revenue was 171 crores, deficit was 26 crores, total expenditure was 197 crores, and 171 crores came also through 2 taxes, income tax and customs duty, and during the wartime there was a special tax on imported alcohol that was only 2.5 crores, and rest was 50 crores customs duty, balance income tax. The last budget which Mr. Chidambaram presented, the total expenditure are more than 15 lakh crores of rupees. The point which I am trying to drive at, when our financial transaction was not so big, so complex, our plan outlay, first 5-year plan, if I remember correctly, original outlay was just 2,000 crores for the full 5 years. Public sector investment in all major 5 central public sector was just 29 crores. Then we devoted 2/3 of the time of Parliament for debate, discussion and guidance to the executives. And when now we are spending huge amount of money Unfortunately, I noticed during my stay in the Lok Sabha, two finance bills with the consent and tacit agreement of the opposition, we had to pass it in deal and bustle without having any discussions. To my mind, this is a very serious weakness of parliamentary system. I would request eminent personalities in JNU could think of and suggest the remedial measures that what we can do at this extent. Of course, the political parties who are the prime actors here, they have to take the lead. But one way could be thought of. As we are established 24 parliamentary standing committees, though parliament is not functioning, most of the times we see that parliament members come, assembly members come, they assemble, and thereafter they go, causing disruption. Once I jokingly told that when I was a student, my teacher taught me that in parliamentary democracy, 3 Ds are essential: debate, and when you have debate, there must be dissension, and finally, you will have to take a decision. So 3 Ds are essential ingredients in parliamentary democracy. But in my lifetime and in my stay in parliament, especially the latter days, I found that our ingenuity having just thrusted another 4th D, that is disruption, along with these 3 Ds as essential ingredients of democracy. Therefore, it is taking place. How quickly we can rectify it, make it remedy, that political establishments will have to think of. But at the same time, one thing could be done, because still I find all the parliamentary standing committees are doing their jobs very efficiently, quickly, in time, without rancor. Most of the time, sometimes there are differences like JPC and other reports, 1 or 2, but those are the rares. Most of the time, opposition, ruling parties, they are giving unanimous recommendation. Whether all the standing committees could be entrusted with the responsibilities of scrutinizing the demands. Of course, amendments of the rules and regulations should be needed. Constitutional amendment may also be required, because Constitution provides no tax can be levied without law enacted by Parliament. No amount can be withdrawn from the Consolidated Fund of India without authority of the Parliament. No money can be spent from the Consolidated Fund of India without the authority of Parliament. And here the interpretation has come by the appropriate authority that Parliament means the whole of Parliament, not part of Parliament. That's why the committees have not given the responsibility to make recommendations for the budget. They can give their comments and they can make certain suggestions, but they cannot recommend that X amount should be brought to Y or Y amount should be added to Z, because that is not the job, that is the job of the whole house. Whole house can accept it or reject it. Another important aspect which we shall have to keep in view, and with that I will conclude. And there too, excuse me for if I say share some of my personal angularity also, because I was deeply involved in it. When the agitation by Sri Anna Hazare was going on in respect of drafting the Lokpal bill, I was visiting some countries and there was a foreign television, I do not remember its name. They asked me that what is this agitation? I said, look, to my mind, I am not talking merely as a representative of the government, but I am just talking as an activist and as a follower of the Indian system, evolution of multi-party democracy in this country. because when I was 13 years old, Indian Constitution was adopted, 1950. Therefore, I am always watching, to my mind it is opening a new dimension of our parliamentary system. Initially we established two tiers in the government, state government, federal government. Thereafter we introduced local government, Panchayati Raj, municipalities, entrusted them with the constitutional powers by making the necessary amendment in the constitution by Rajiv Gandhi. Jawaharlal Nehru gave us fundamentals of the parliamentary democracy. Rajiv Gandhi expanded it through the institutions of Panchayati Raj and municipalities and going to further grassroots level. Now this is another dimension. The civil societies can agitate for a particular piece of legislation and open a new chapter in our parliamentary functioning, that it is no longer the domain of the legislators either in the state assemblies or in the federal parliament. I have a say. Earlier what we used to do, sometimes if we found that certain piece of legislation require wider consultation, we used to put it in the website, or we could use to earlier days when website was not there, we used to send it from the parliamentary secretariat to various chamber of commerce, universities and enlightened bodies to give their opinion and inviting them sometimes to appear before the select committee to give their evidence. Nowadays, and especially in a piece of legislation which was going on for almost 4 decades, fortunately it has been passed now, but 70s, 80s, 90s, as many as 8 times, this bill was debated, discussed, and final stage it came. Even in one bill, I myself as chairman of the standing committee recommended during the NDA regime. So, on a piece of legislation like this, if somebody takes the initiative and says that I have drafted one, you come and discuss with me. And I think our Prime Minister did the correct thing by agreeing to this view. Whether it will succeed or not, I do not know. But it is a new dimension of our democracy where we can accommodate the civil societies, views of the organized civil society, and it is no longer merely confined to the legislatures. Ladies and gentlemen, I have taken longer time than I intended to have, but I would not like to take more time. One last point I would like to say, as the wastage of time, I have made some calculations and you have also seen it time to time, Lok Sabha Secretariat or Parliamentary Secretariat bring it. The total time lost in the interruption and disruptions, in 10th Lok Sabha it was 5.28%. And in the 14th Lok Sabha, it came down to 37.77%. And 15th Lok Sabha, I am afraid it will be much more, because I did not give the figure, because one session is still left and I am keeping my fingers crossed. In regard to the discipline, I will quote Nehru, and then because of certain indiscipline, some members were expelled from the house, and it was done during the Nehru's time, some misdemeanor. And there is a practice that leader of the house is to move the resolution, because house can expel a member, but house can never transact a business without a formal substantive motion. And that motion was, Nehru moved it, and while moving that motion he said, I will submit to you, sir, addressing the speaker, and to the house, that the least we can do is to accept this and thereby give an indication to the house, to the country, and to other assemblies in India that we shall adhere strongly to behavior that is expected of such a high assembly as Parliament and other representative bodies in India. And naturally, finally the member was suspended from the House for the first time, which is known as famous as Mudgal case. Later on, of course, it became so often that during the 14th Lok Sabha, as leader of the House, I had to expel as many as 13 members against whom allegations were brought for taking money for putting some questions and certain other fiscal and other indulgences. That is one side of the picture. But the brighter side of the picture is that Parliament, despite so much criticism, rose to the occasion, took action, and in all these occasions, the resolutions were adopted by the House unanimously, and the expelled members belonged to this party or that party, to some party. They were not independents. And that is the strength of the Indian Parliament, that is the strength of Indian democracy, multi-party democracy. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for the patience you have given to me by listening to my observations. Thank you. Jai Hind.